Cesar Chavez was born on March 31, 1927, to Juana Estrada and Librado Chavez in Yuma, Arizona. His parents owned a farm, grocery store, garage, and a pool hall. Unfortunately, in 1938, the Chavez family is evicted from their land after losing their livelihood in the Great Depression. They become full-time migrant farm workers in Arizona and California. Between the years of 1942 through 1946, Cesar Chavez quits grammar school to work in the fields. Chavez moves to California with his wife and 8 children in 1948. Cesar would then meet Father Donald McDonald, who served in the Santa Clara County and would assist him by doing chores as well as carpentry work, cleaning, and painting. He drove Father McDonald to perform Mass at nearby camps for imported bracero farm laborers and for prisoners at the county jail. In turn, Father McDonald introduced Chavez to the social justice teachings of the Catholic Church and to works on spirituality and human rights, including the writings of St. Francis of Assisi and M.K. Gandhi, and classics of political philosophy. As Chavez's education expanded, Father Donald McDonald introduced Fred Ross, a community organizer, to Cesar Chavez. Chavez urged Mexican Americans to register and vote, and he traveled throughout California and made speeches in support of workers' rights. In 1958, Chavez becomes executive director of the CSO and moves to Los Angeles. Cesar Chavez wanted to expand the organization to also help the labor workers, so in 1962 he founds the National Farm Worker Association in Delano, California. The NFWA is dedicated to the rights of migrant workers, including a minimum wage, insurance, and collective bargaining. In this year, he would also meet one of the most influential Latina labor activists of the 20th century named Dolores Huerta.
Dolores Huerta was born on April 10, 1930 in Dawson, New Mexico. Her father, Juan Fernandez, was a farm worker, miner, union activist, and would later become a state legislator. Her parents divorced when she was 3. Her mother, Alicia, would then move her siblings and her to Stockton, California. Her mother's independence and ambitiousness was one of the reasons why she became a feminist. In high school, Dolores was active in numerous school clubs, a majorette, and a dedicated member of the Girl Scout until the age of 18. After graduating high school, she would then receive an associate's teaching degree from the University of Pacific Delta College. She began teaching grammar school but resigned soon after. She was distraught at the sight of children coming to class hungry and needing clothes. In her resignation, she stated, "I quit because I can't stand seeing kids come to school hungry and needing shoes. I thought I could do more by organizing farm workers than by trying to teach their hungry children." In 1955, Huerta began her career as an activist by helping Frank Ross to start the Stockton chapter of the Community Service Organization. By helping, she realized that she found her calling as an organizer. In 1960, she helped found the Agricultural Workers Association and set it up voting registration drives. It was through Fred Ross that she would soon meet Cesar Chavez and share the same visions of helping farm workers. After knowing each other, they decided to organize the beginning of the National Farm Workers Association.
The NFWA was the start to Cesar Chavez's goal to start a labor union. By 1965, the National Farm Workers Association had acquired 1,200 members through Chavez's person-to-person recruitment efforts, which he learned from Fred Ross just a decade earlier. Out of those 1,200, only about 200 paid dues. Although still in its early stages, the organization lent its support to a strike by workers in the rose industry in 1965. This initial protest by the organization resulted in a failed attempt to strike against the rose industry. In that same year, the Filipino American workers, members of the Agricultural Organization Committee, protested against the Delano area table and wine grape growers due to years of poor pay and working conditions. The Filipinos then asked Cesar and Dolores' organization to join their strike. At first, Cesar and the leaders of the NFWA thought it would take years before the union was ready for a strike. But he also knew if both groups organized together to walk out, it would help get the people's attention. On September 16, 1965, Cesar's union voted to join the Filipino workers. He insisted that both organizations should strike together, sharing the same picket lines, strike kitchens, and union halls. He asked the strikers to remain nonviolent and peaceful. The strike drew unprecedented support from outside the Central Valley, other unions, church activists, students, and others. On 1966, the strikers marched about 300 miles from Delano to Sacramento, California, to present a list of demands, but were not granted their wishes. In that same year, the NFWA and AWOC would officially merge to become the United Farm Workers of America and becomes an affiliate of the AFL-CIO.
2.5 years into the strike, some strikers, mostly young men, became impatient. Many strikers talked about violence and striking back at the growers who abused them. They thought that by fighting back, they can prove their manliness. Cesar Chavez did not agree with those who thought that way. He wanted to follow Gandhi's and Martin Luther King Jr.'s practice of nonviolence. He believed that no violence was more powerful than violence. Cesar quoted Gandhi, "Do something, offer your life. If you really want to do something, be willing to die for it." Cesar Chavez didn't teach people by lecturing or telling them what to do. He led examples such as planting little seeds of hope that sprouted into a revived movement. Following the example of Gandhi, Cesar announced on February 1968 that he was fasting to eradicate the movement to nonviolence. He went without food for 25 days, only drinking water. It was an act of penitence for those who advocated violence and a way of taking responsibility as leader of this movement. The fast divided the organization staff. Some members didn't understand why Cesar was doing it, but others were worried about his health. In 25 days, Cesar lost 35 pounds and was told by his doctor that his life was in danger. Thankfully, the fast worked. All talk of violence officially stopped. Dr. King wrote Cesar, expressing admiration and solidarity. The fast ended during a mass in Delano with thousands, including Senator Robert F. Kennedy. Cesar was too weak to speak, so his statement was read for him. "It's my deepest belief that by giving our lives to we find life. The truest act of courage, the strongest act of manliness, is to sacrifice ourselves for others in a totally nonviolent struggle for justice. To be a man is to suffer for others. God help us to be men." The grape strike continued, and so did the grape boycott.
The strikers were joined by thousands of supporters who helped tirelessly organize the boycott. Cesar and the farm workers believed if consumers and committees throughout North America knew about the suffering of field laborers and saw the grape strikers struggling nonviolently, they would respond. For Cesar, nonviolence couldn't be understood in the abstract. It could only be seen in action. He said, "The whole essence of nonviolent action is getting a lot of people involved, vast numbers doing little things." The boycott connected middle-class families in big cities with poor farm worker families in the California vineyards. Millions stopped eating grapes. By 1970, the grape boycott was a complete success. Table grape growers signed their first union contracts granting workers better pay, benefits, and protections. In the decades that followed, Cesar and the UFW continued using nonviolent strikes, boycotts, and marches and fasts to help farm workers stand up for their rights and gather support from ordinary Americans to aid them in their efforts. First, union contracts requiring rest periods, toilets in the fields, clean drinking water, hand washing facilities, banning discrimination in employment, requiring protective clothing against pesticide exposure, sexual harassment of women workers, prohibiting pesticide spraying while workers are in the field, and dangerous pesticides. They also established the first comprehensive union medical benefits for farm workers and their families through Joint Union Employer Health and the Welfare Fund, the Robert F. Kennedy Medical Plan. They also provided the first and only functioning pension plan for retired farm workers. They were also the first union contracts providing for profit sharing and parental leave, abolishing the infamous short-handled water hose that crippled generations of many farm workers. They also helped to extend the farm workers' state coverage under unemployment insurances, disability, and workers' compensation, as well as federal amnesty rights for immigrants. UFW is one of the nation's first successful and largest farm workers union, currently active in 10 states. UFW continues to organize in major agriculture industries across the nation. After the passing of the legendary founder in 1983, the Texas native Arturo S. Rodriguez took over the helm of the UFW. Rodriguez since then has increased union membership with aggressive organizing and negotiating campaigns for agreements with the nation's largest vegetable growers to the 2011 law signing by Governor Jerry Brown, helping farm workers organize when growers denied them the right to have a union. Farm labor organizer was first introduced to Cesar Chavez through his parish priest in his hometown of San Antonio, Texas in 1966. He became active as a UFW boycott as a student in St. Mary's University. And in 1973, he began serving full-time with UFW, where he first met Cesar, who became his mentor for 20 years. Rodriguez has been organizing farm workers, negotiating UFW contracts, and leading many farm worker boycott and political drives all over America with 40 years of experience. Leaders of the UFW today are Teresa Romero, Secretary of Treasury; Irv Hirschenbaum, First Vice President; Efren Barajas, Second Vice President; Give Cashcool, Third Vice President; Armando Elenes, National Vice President; Eric Nicholson, National Vice President; Erica Navarrete, National Vice President.
In 2012, President Barack Obama awarded Dolores Huerta the Medal of Freedom.
And as Cesar Chavez would always say, sí se puede.